God, Power Rangers. Do you guys remember those? So like, let's just break it down for all you young folk out there. These were the Power Rangers, and these were the only Power
Oh
Rangers that ever.
wow.
Okay, um, all the other Power Rangers don't actually matter. But yeah, you had Billy, you had the Blue Ranger, you had the Yellow Ranger, you had the Red Ranger. He was like the leader, right? He was the alpha male. He was like, oh, I'm like a football jock. Blah 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 blah. You had the Pink Ranger. This was like every guy's like first crush right here. Yeah. Then you had the Black Ranger. But then you get the Green Ranger, but he's not a ranger. He's like an evil bad guy, right? And he's like so cool. And then yeah, he's just like total badass. Like he had like an ear piercing, I think, and like super long hair, and it was just like, oh my god, he's so cool. But then turns out he has a change of heart, kind of like Darth Vader, right? And then like becomes the White Ranger, becomes a good guy, and then they join forces, and it was just such a fucking epic show. Anyways, I don't know. That was like a background. Um, so there is an HBO show called Hollywood Demons, and every single episode is about a different topic. And it's very documentary. I think every episode's like 1.5 to 2 hours long. It's pretty meaty. So they did one about the Power Rangers curse. Um, there was the Red Ranger that straight up murdered somebody, and in my opinion, got away with it. He straight up Game of Thrones shoved a sword through like across the body, going through like the organs and the lung. It was like it was self defense, and I just poked him with the sword. He got 6 years in prison for that murder, by the way. Very weird. Um, the Yellow Ranger was killed in a car crash at 27. That's why it's the only signature I do not have. Because I don't really think really anyone has that autograph. I could be wrong, but it's very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you had Eric Frank. All right, let me break this down. The actor of the Green Ranger, Jason David Frank, um, who probably everyone heard of after the Power Rangers. He was the only one that went on. He obviously he did many series of Power Rangers, but he also opened up his own like MMA gym. He was very public in the public eye. He went to a lot of conventions, talked to a lot of people. Was really like the fan favorite for everyone. Um, he actually grew up really poor. They go into like all of this in the documentary. So him and his brother Eric Frank, lived in a trailer, pretty abusive household. Um, and then Jason David Frank got his kind of career kickoff with the Power Rangers. Um, so yeah, his career went obviously through the roof with Power Rangers. His brother tried to be on the show as a White Ranger later on, um, but it didn't really work out. Um, and then he hung himself in his own home. He killed himself at the age of 29. And his wife is actually like talking about the situation, how he was playing with the children. He said, I'm going to go up and like take a nap. And then he went upstairs and hung himself. Very sad. And then you have Jason David Frank, who obviously, if you recall, killed himself at 49 in 2022. Um, so they dive into like Jason David Frank's like mental illness, his background, his like struggle with depression. Everyone looked to him as like really the badass, the strong one.
Mm-hmm.
So he felt like he couldn't go and seek help. He couldn't appear to be weak. So unfortunately, what he ended up doing was just trying to just take all of it, um, and not seek help. And then him and his wife at the time went out, partied, did some drugs. I believe they stated like he had like way more drugs in his system than like a normal person should. And then he went up to his hotel room and hung himself. Very sad documentary, especially if you're like a Power Rangers fan. Um, but I think it paints like this like Jason David Frank was the Green Ranger, and everyone like he was like our hero growing up, right? Um, but they're just like normal people that have their own like mental illness and like shit going on in their lives. Um, I think this is like a message to all of us. Like we need to get over this like, oh, I can't seek help. I shouldn't, like I can't appear to be weak and
Yeah.
just try to make it.
No, absolutely. I also know that the way that they treated those kids, and I'm going to call them kids in this case, on the Power Ranger show was awful. There's a pretty good interview on YouTube that Austin St. John and Walter Jones did about 4 months ago, where they like deep dive for like an hour on how the contract stuff was set up, how they were exploited, how it was like a non-union gig at the time, and all the stuff that was going on with that production company when they first kicked off the Power Rangers. And like they're like the Power Rangers is a breakaway, runaway hit on Fox, right? And these kids don't basically see a nickel of it, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, we're going to do this major Hollywood movie. And they barely got paid squat, right? Like all these guys were basically broke and working on this show and being this big cultural zeitgeist characters for a large portion of kids. And they were just exploited to no end, right? Just left, right, and sideways. And so you guys should check that one out too, because they go a lot into this. And I'm sure how these guys were treated, uh, really, um, really impacted their mental health, including Jason David Franks.
Yeah. um, and they go into all of that. They go into like is his name Saban? Saban?
Yeah.
Uh, the founder, like
Mm-hmm.
how he came up with the idea, how he saw a very similar show in Japan and then was like,
Basically
shit,
stole footage from it.
and totally did. Yeah. And they go into the contracts and they go into like working like 12 to 14 hours a day and like getting paid only um I think it was like $750 a week or something.
Yeah.
But like they go into like they have this I think he's like a psychologist or something, but like they go into this, you're really young, you're struggling, you're trying to make it in Hollywood. You don't have your break yet though. And then you have a really big group come up to you and is like, "Hey, like do you want to become a star?" And that's why they even go into like why they started doing like a different cast every season or every couple of seasons, because they would get in and just work them to death until like the Power Rangers were like, I don't want to do this anymore. The Yellow Ranger, they actually go into like there was this like huge I think dinner with Fox where they were like promoting the Power Rangers and they were on stage and doing kicks and punches for all the executives. And then the Yellow Ranger just got up and gave a huge speech about like how like everyone's getting rich and like they're using um all the children pretty much to like make their millions of dollars and it's really fucked up and like really you guys need to treat us better and stuff. And then she was kicked out of the Power Rangers. Yeah, it was it's a very interesting documentary. It really takes kind of like what you mentioned, really takes a deep dive into like what they went through, how that affected them, how you took like really poor children pretty much, and then
And actors who are just looking for their break. Every
yeah,
actor in Hollywood is just looking for that break, to get cast, just to work, right? And so when it makes them easier to exploit. And somebody in the chat said, is the exploitation of abusive child actors ever going to stop? And then they asked about the Nickelodeon documentary. And yeah, there was the one from a few months ago, Quiet on the Set, where Drake Bell finally recounted publicly the abuse that he received when he was a kid. Um,
oh,
and I would say that a lot of the upside to these documentaries, to documentaries like Quiet on the Set, is I do think a lot of these young child actors who were exploited, who were abused, them coming forward and telling their stories, I do believe is having a positive impact on that industry. I know that they've passed a bunch of laws in California. You're now seeing similar laws being passed for family vlogging channels.
Oh yeah.
Right? Where they're like, no, you got to set aside money for them. You know, where they're starting to see that same kind of impact happening with the family vlogging that happened with child stars in the 90s and 2000s. So I do think that these documentaries are helping shine light on the industry. And I think the fact that companies like Max and Paramount are willing to air these, because they could refuse to air these documentaries. They could shove them in a drawer. They could make sure that the majority of the public never saw this, right? But they're not. And I think that speaks well to them in that there are people within Hollywood who are willing to go back and go, we did a lot of bad things and we need to make up for it.
Yeah.
So do I think it's getting better? I think so. I think there's probably more protections now than there were 30 years ago when these guys were doing Power Rangers. And like Jay, like I was right, like Jay's a little bit younger than me. Like I was right in that prime age demographic. Like I was, I think 10 when the Power Rangers first came out, right? I remember when the Green Ranger came and he played his knife flute, right?
Yeah.
And he had his big, Dragon Zord, and then he became the White Ranger and he had the Falcon Zord and it shot missiles out of the front of its wings. And, I mean, this was all cultural zeitgeist stuff for people our age, And I said, we had no idea how bad it was for the people who were making the thing that we all love so much.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. It's kind of like the dark side to all of this. Right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
All
right. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Have you seen the documentary? Have you seen Quiet on the Set from Nickelodeon? Let us know what you think. Let us know what else Hollywood could do to make the lives better for young actors.